again with another video. Hope you're doing well. Hope your life's going well. Hope this week has gone well for you, and I hope that today has gone well for you. Today is Sunday. It is Sunday evening. Time is 5:40 p.m. Central Standard Time, and I hope that y'all had a wonderful weekend. I hope it's been a fun and productive weekend for you. Happy Easter. If you're someone who celebrates Easter, and also today is Resurrection Day, if you are religious. And so, if you did go to church today, I hope that it was a good service, a good sermon, and hopefully they preached an inspiring message. Today I didn't really do a whole lot. I did go to the park and just kind of walked around and did a little bit of early grocery shopping, but I didn't really do a whole lot. But so I don't know if you can hear it. My fan is actually on. Just trying to create some white noise because my apartment is actually kind of close to the pool. So if there's people like at the pool, sometimes you can hear them. And there's people at the pool right now. But the fan does a pretty good job of like drowning out that sound, right? It's not coming in too much in my headphones, so I think that it should be fine. Yeah. But what I want to talk about in this video was just something I was thinking about while I was driving. Here in America, it kind of seems like our culture, right? American culture is basically work, consume, and then once you do that, die. Work, consume, and then die. That's what it is. And it's unfortunate that American culture is this way because there is so much more to life than working, than consuming, right? Buying things that you don't need with money that you don't have, to impress people that you don't like. Consumerism, the latest and greatest everything, the latest and greatest vehicle, right? The McMansion, right? Consumption. And it creates this endless cycle, right? This cycle that's hard to break out of working and then consuming and then just working and working and working. And it's like, it's nearly impossible to actually get off of that hamster wheel, especially nowadays. There was a time when there was an end date to that hamster wheel. You put in 30 years at that company. You started a company in your, early, mid-20s. You worked there for your 30 years. Retire in your 50s and live out a decent life. Nowadays, that's not even the case. You got people, basically working until they die. And it seems like that's going to become the norm here in the near future. Like you just work, consume, and then you die. Right? They don't want you to break out of this cycle. That's what it seems like to me. This whole system is set up for you to basically be a consumer and be a worker. They don't want you, deviating off that course. Basically work consume, die. That's what it is. That's what it is. That's why it's so funny when people make fun of others for figuring out a way to get off of this path. Right? There's people that do van life where, yeah, they still work, but guess what? They don't work as many hours as the average American. And they get to travel all over America. They get to see the national parks, the nature, the mountains, the beaches, every part of America. They don't worry about some rent payment, some mortgage payment. But you look at the average American and they see, oh, that person lives in a van. Look at that broke bum. He's a bum. He's homeless. He doesn't have a real house. He doesn't have an apartment. He doesn't have a place where, he doesn't have a place where he's making some landlord richer or some bank richer. Right? Because remember, with the mortgage, you're making the bank richer with that interest. Remember, you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest when you buy a house. Just remember that. Yeah, you want that fancy $300,000 McMansion. Yeah, you want that big fancy $300,000 McMansion in the suburbs that you're going to go and pull out a 30-year mortgage for. Well, guess what? You're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest. Look it up. You get one of these high interest rates, high interest rate. Remember, 7-8%, that's average. When years ago, that's considered high. Now it's not even considered high anymore. You go pull out a mortgage for $300,000 at a 7-8% interest rate, you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest. But they'll tell you, oh, that's normal. Oh, that's normal. Are you kidding me? How is that normal to pay that much in interest and make a bank richer? You getting poorer, they getting richer. Remember, your wages are pretty stagnant already. But you just have to show off. You just have to get that big old fancy house with all these rooms that you're probably not even going to use. That $50,000 car. I always bring that example. That $50,000 car. That $50,000 Benz. That $50,000 I was actually about to say Cadillac Escalade, but those are like what, 80,000-90,000 now new. I don't even think you can get a new Cadillac Escalade for $50,000. What they closer to about $100,000 now. Oh yeah, you got people that's gonna line up to get to pull out a loan for that Escalade too. With them $600-$800 car payments, you making the bank richer with that too. You paying thousands of dollars in interest in that too. And that go down in value. At least with a home, it goes up in value. But I mean, what's interesting though? Even if you bought that home, you paid it off, and it went up in price, right? It went up in value. I mean, you have to sell that house in order to essentially get that gain, like actually realize that gain. But guess what? Don't you have to buy another house? If you sell that house, if you don't buy another house, you're going to be homeless. Or you can go rent an apartment somewhere. But a lot of people don't want to go from a house back to an apartment. So you're going to buy another house. But guess what? All these other houses are overpriced too. Are you really winning when you sell that house for a gain? I mean, you didn't already pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest anyway. Remember, you paid off that house. That 30 years, you paid it off. Right? Work, consume, die. make the rich richer as the poor get poorer. And guess what? You work your whole life to pay for these things. Yeah, you done worked, 50 years. You done retired at, 70 years old. Now you don't have the energy to do the things that you always wanted to do, because, you're older. And we got programmed to think that 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever of vacation, that's normal. Really, a lot of these jobs is 2 weeks of vacation. It ain't even 3 weeks. We ought to go to what's that country that basically makes it a law that you have to give employees 5 weeks of vacation? I forgot which country that was, but it's somewhere in Europe. I know for a fact. It should be like that all over the world. What's wrong with having 5 weeks of vacation? Think about it. The world's morale would probably be a lot better too. You'd have more people spending money on vacations too, right? Putting money back into the economy anyway. Sorry, I'm kind of all over the place, but basically my point is, we work, we consume, and then we die. We don't really go out and have experiences, right? We don't really just cherish the little things in life. All we do is work. You got people out here working 60 and 70 hours a week like that's normal. They got folk thinking that that's normal. In the trucking industry, you have a 70-hour DOT clock. A lot of guys used nearly all of that 70-hour clock up. And that's crazy. Because for some jobs, that's what is expected of you, to work close to 70 hours a week, run that 70-hour clock all the way down. I can't do it. Job I work, I don't work no 65, 70 hours a week. I don't do that. Not in the job I have. This is crazy. They tell you that's normal, man. It's like, what? And then guess what? When you work, you make all that money. What do? You spend most of it on rent, car notes, overpriced electric bill, right? Just all types of nonsense. You need electricity. Let me not say that. Let me not put electricity in that category. But just other stuff, man, you don't need. And a lot of the wages aren't keeping up. So here it is. You're not making enough money to afford all these things anyway. So then you go out and put it on a credit card. It's crazy, I was thinking about, what if I was 30 years old? I had all this money in my 401k, Roth IRA, savings account, high yield savings account, a regular taxable brokerage account. Everything is going so perfect, right? I bought my McMansion out in the suburbs. I bought my nice fancy car that I'm financing through the dealership. Just one of these dealership approved bank loans. And then all of a sudden, I get diagnosed with a terminal illness. Doctors say I only got about a year to live, 6 months to a year to live. You know, that would cause me to do a lot of reflection. That would cause me to think about, where have I been prioritizing most of my life? Have I prioritized towards making money? Have I really gotten a chance to enjoy life? Have I gotten a chance to travel, see new places, spend enough time with family, friends, loved ones? Have I lived a fulfilled life? I would be reflecting on all of these things. I only got 6 months to a year left to live on this earth. That's what it would cause me to do. Meanwhile, I'm in a job, where I'm working. Work, consume, die. It's a cycle that most people are on. It's a cycle that for many people, they will never get out of. We're all gonna die. We all have a date that we gonna go on out of here. This temporary experience. Where do you prioritize your life? Where do you prioritize most of your time? Are you living a fulfilled life? Is money really that important in the grand scheme of things? Like, if you ever got diagnosed with a terminal illness, would you really be that concerned with money? Would you realize that money is one of those things where we dedicate most of our time to making it, but then at the end you realize, does it really matter? The money, the assets, the house, the car, does all that stuff really matter in the grand scheme of things? Or does living a fulfilled life matter? An experience-filled life matter? Again, you deviate off this path, you're weird, you're broke, you're homeless. All because they decided they ain't gonna make that landlord richer. They not gonna make that mortgage company richer, that bank richer. I think about this myself. I think about this myself a lot. What am I doing in my life? I live a pretty regular life. I go to work, I come home. I live in an apartment. But I know there's more out there. And, I know there are more experiences to be had out there. That's why every opportunity I get, I want to try to have some experiences. And that's also, why I was talking about, taking a weekend trip, somewhere, taking weekend trips. Because even in a short amount of time, you can make a memorable experience. Something to think about. Something to think about. Right? I also think about, what if I got diagnosed with an illness? Now I gotta liquidate all these assets I had. The house, the car, the bank accounts just to pay for the treatments. Because the medical industry, they gonna make that money. They gonna make that money. Okay. All these treatments are tens of thousands of dollars. Was it worth it in the end? Now you have some illness and all your money is gone. Did you live a fulfilled life? Right? Did you do the things you wanted to do in life? Did you have a happy life? Were you happy? Or did you spend most of your time stressed out because you worked 60 hours a week and you hardly had time to do anything? But guess what? You made really good money. Work, consume, die. They don't even want you to retire anymore. They want you to just die working. That's best case scenario for them. Sad. Social Security. Think about it. Social Security don't even pay you enough to live. You would think something like that. How much money they take from you for Social Security, that would pay for all your basic necessities later in life. That should be enough to afford, a rent payment, plus groceries, plus utilities at least, to keep you afloat. But it's not. By design. Man, they really do us dirty. I ain't gonna lie to you. Work, consume, die. That's why you need to live life. You need to make your life interesting. And I tell myself this stuff too. I need to do things in life. I need to make my life interesting. Right? You need to create your story. You have a story that you can create yourself. Right? You have a perspective that you can create. You need to go out there and do it. Make your story interesting. Would it make for an interesting story if you just reflected back over life and all you did was work, pay bills, didn't really do anything other than that? Would that make for an interesting life when you're, reflecting back on your life? It's something to think about. I'm telling you, it's something to think about. I was just thinking about this while I was driving home, and it's like it really is something that many people don't truly get to do. They don't get to create an interesting story. They don't get to write that story. They don't get to create that story for their life. They reflect back on it and all they did was work. And that's why it makes me so sad when I see people like right around the retirement age and then they get diagnosed with like some sort of terminal illness right around their retirement age, 60 years old, 55 years old, terminal illness. 6 months to live. Then they reflect back on it and they wish that they did more with their life. They wish they took more risk in life. They wish they did something different in life. The safe path is working and consuming. Just working at this job and, taking you 2 weeks of vacation per year and just doing that till you get old. You get gray hairs and You know? Is that what you want for your life? Think about it. I don't know. I want to make my life interesting. I want to create a unique perspective of life. I want to take more risk in life. Let me tell you something, y'all. Me creating this YouTube channel, that was sort of a risk in a way. Because YouTube, put myself out on the internet for the whole world to see. That was a risk that I took, right? But I felt I needed to do that in order to add this to my story, right? Creating videos that help people on YouTube, right? When I first started making ASMR videos, I didn't even show my face. I didn't show my full face. I showed like half my face because I was so self-conscious about how I looked. I was so scared that I was going to get judged. Now here I am today. I show my full face because I don't care. There have been people that have talked about how I look, right? But now I'm so secure in how I look, I don't really care about what people think, right? I've been called a variety of things. I've been called handsome. I've been called ugly, unattractive throughout my life. There's a wide range, right? And that's why, not to get too off topic, but I know I be doing that sometimes, but looks are all about perspective. One person can look at you. One person can look at me and say that I'm ugly. Another person can look at me and say that I'm attractive. I'm handsome. I'm good looking. It's all perspective. That's why you really shouldn't care and put too much stock into somebody judging the way you look. I realize that as I get older. But, going out and taking risk, right? Fast forward to today, I'm very comfortable here on YouTube. Showing my face, I do that like it's nothing, right? Don't care. Get out of your comfort zone. Take risk. Calculated risk, I must say. Don't be too reckless now. But make your life story interesting. You want to be able to tell an interesting story about your life. You want to be able to reflect on an interesting story about your life. Think about what I'm saying here in this video. They want us in this work, consume, die hamster wheel. The hamster, they run on the hamster wheel, but they're not really getting anywhere. The rat race. It's crazy. It's a cycle that they have programmed us to think is normal. Most of us are in it. Be different. Think about it. I'm kind of talking to myself in this video too. Be different. Do something. Be someone. Right? You know that that famous mural. If you're in Houston, you're driving down Interstate 45, right, where it merges with I-10, just north of downtown, and you have that railroad bridge, and that mural is painted there. Be someone. Now, it gets painted over sometimes, but I noticed that it gets painted back again to be someone. Be someone. That's a real message. That's a real message. Anyway, let me bring this video to a close. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you were relaxed, and I hope that I gave you something to think about. Thanks for watching. Oh, and by the way, also too, that mural, I don't know if I said it, that mural's in Houston. It's again, Interstate 45, right where it merges with I-10, just north of downtown. If you're going south, that railroad bridge, it might not be there now, but for the longest time, the saying "be someone" was painted on that railroad bridge. So yeah, thanks for watching.